Thanks for your patience. Thank you for your patience, everyone.
Hey, thanks for sticking with me, guys. We need a new camera. All right, my name is Sam Berube, and I'm presenting on what I learned during my senior seminar project, and not just the findings of my research, because I had to write a research paper, but more the overall life lessons. Some of them were funny, some of them were more traditional life lessons that I took away from it. I had a multifaceted project. The first part was completing an almost 250-mile bike ride from the Canadian border to the Portsmouth Harbor, just to raise funds for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. And the Muscular Dystrophy Association, as the name suggests, is an association that works to improve the lives of people with muscular dystrophy, and they also work towards a cure. This is my fundraising page. In order to complete the ride, I originally needed to raise $1,000. I thought that would be a huge challenge for me, since I've been on class officers in the past and we've had a bit of trouble raising money. But it turns out when the cause is muscular dystrophy and not our junior prom, we raise money much faster, and I almost doubled my goal. This is a picture of the car's GPS that my dad and I took to the Canadian border, because there's no way I would have to bike back to get the car afterwards. You can see the circle where the car was, and the gray line is the Canadian border, and you can see the scale of 1 mile. So we were very, very close. We started at a fire station just south of the Canadian border. The hotel room that we stayed in was the Northern Comfort Motel, and they used actual keys and advertised telephones as an amenity, because it turns out that under the Canadian border is very rural, and people haven't updated to 21st century technology totally yet. This is a picture of my bike. Over the 3-day bike ride, I named it Lucy, because things got loose, I fell off of it, and it turns out that it is not sufficient to, well, it was sufficient to ride across New Hampshire, but everyone else there had fancy carbon fiber road bikes, and when I was training for it, I thought that this was it. This was the best that I could have, but I was wrong. It turns out that my bike was both an antique bike and a mountain bike. It worked for what I needed it to. So the start of the race was very cold, and I watched everyone take out their fancy bikes, and we started biking, and I thought this wasn't so bad. I was with a main pack. We were traveling along Route 3, and then suddenly everyone took off, leaving me alone. This is the first day of the ride. You can see the map. I lost everyone else right about here. So I had a lot of time to think about my project. Now, obviously, you saw the next slide already. That's what I looked like when I got to Lincoln. I realized my second life lesson was wear sunscreen when you're holding your arms out for 8 hours in June. This is the picture of the second day of the ride. You can see I traveled from Lincoln, and I'm in Franklin in this picture, but we ended up in Concord. It was good to end up in Concord for a day of the ride, because I got to go home and sleep in my own bed. That was definitely restorative. The first night I slept in a Days Inn in Lincoln, where the MBA was kind enough to give us free rooms. And I slept with a roommate, Cliff Cars. He is Spencer DeFoss's, his stepdad. I don't know if many of you know Spencer. He goes to school and he is affected by muscular dystrophy. So when I complained to Cliff about my sunburns, he came back with, well, when I am challenged by something, I think that this is what people with muscular dystrophy, they deal with frustrations like this every day, or worse, and that's what keeps me going. And I thought that was a good life lesson. This is a picture of the Concord Fire Station with everyone who completed the ride in front of it. You can see in the middle is Ricky. Ricky was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy at 15 months old, and the ride this year was dedicated to him. This will help send him to summer camp and also pay for some medical expenses that his family may have. A side note, a life lesson I learned in Concord, and in Lincoln, and in Portsmouth, is that firefighters make the best spaghetti ever. So totally take them up on that if you're ever offered spaghetti by a firefighter. This is the third day's map. It went from Concord to Portsmouth, and I felt very good that day, even though I was already sunburned and bruised from when I took a spill coming into Concord. And this is the finish. It doesn't show it very well, but it shows the carbon fiber road bike and my bike. I was happy to be done at that point, but it was a great experience. This is the accessible picnic table that I mentioned. It was originally planned that I would fundraise for this picnic table by going to the same people who I went to for the bike ride. Overall, this only raised a few dollars because they had already given me money for the bike ride. So I ended up having to go to Home Depot and asking for materials there. And I built it over the course of a few weeks in entirely thunderstorms because this summer was very sporadic weather-wise. And I ended up having to build during thunderstorms under the carport. And I was always afraid that I would be struck by lightning while using the power tools. Because of this, I always rushed inside just as soon as it started to thunder. And I ended up, the first time I built the prototype of the table, with one side much higher than the other, because I was fleeing from thunder and screwed it in wrong. Now that's fixed, as you can see, and I believe it will have a great impact on our school, especially because there have been times recently, even during the senior breakfast last Friday, that a group of friends and I were trying to sit around a table and talk. And in order to include everyone, including Elizabeth, who's in the back of the room right now, we had to have people turn around so that they could have conversations. And it really created a two-group dynamic, whereas this would allow everyone to be included. This slide is intentionally blank because I wanted to talk about my paper. And the rubric said, don't put words on the slides. And I figured putting my multi-page paper would violate that rule significantly. Now, my paper's thesis was how can we as a society integrate people with physical disabilities better? And the finding was pretty obvious. It was pretty in your face. You cannot have a cookie cutter explanation on how to deal with individual people, because people are all different personalities, have all different social boundaries, and respond to different situations differently. However, the underlying theme of the research was that everyone who I either interviewed, read about, or watched documentaries on wanted more independence in their lives. Now, that doesn't mean if you see someone struggling with a tray of food or a door, regardless of whether they have a physical disability or not, you shouldn't help them because you're letting them be independent. But it does mean that if you have a situation where you are handing out invites to a birthday party and you think someone with a physical disability won't be able to make it, you should still give them an invite, because it's nice to be invited even if you can't make it. And from what I learned, it will either turn out that the person with a physical disability will be able to work around and make the plans work, or they will just say, thank you for the invite, but I can't go. This is connected to the last story I had, which is from an interview with Elizabeth, where she was talking about how one of her campmates at a summer camp once asked her to go get an iPad from a counselor. When she asked why she had to go get the iPad, they responded with, you're in a wheelchair, they'll give you whatever you want. Now, this is a prime example of how not to treat people with physical disabilities. If you're treating people with independence and respect, they will respond well, it will impact the community in a way that affects everyone. So if you just treat others with respect, they'll treat you with respect, and it will snowball and create a better community. Questions?
Sam, is the table here yet, or when do you plan on bringing the table?
I hope to bring it down within the next few days. It's sitting in my driveway and it's just difficult to